Ahoy hoy, I'm Planetwalk, and today's video is going to be about the one, the Counterspace, the only Ken Wheeler. Now for those that don't know, Ken Wheeler is the person behind the Theoria Apophasis YouTube channel, which has over 260,000 subscribers. I do not know if I've got the pronunciation right, but I'm going to assume that I have, and I'm just going to say Ken Wheeler from now on because it's much easier. Now, I have a lot of problems with Ken Wheeler, primarily his pseudoscientific nonsense, which we will get into. Now, because of all these problems that I have with Ken Wheeler, in my opinion, I legitimately think that Ken Wheeler is a grifter. Now, I have leaned towards Ken Wheeler being more of a con man, but his actions to me seem more like the actions of a grifter rather than a con man. He may lie to people in order to get money off people, but it's not something where he will lie to people which will make people think it's in my best interest to give this person money. Now I know that I'm going to get people who will say, you're just accusing Ken Wheeler of lying in order to discredit him because you don't like him, you have no arguments. To which I say, that is partially correct, because I am accusing Ken Wheeler of lying to discredit him, because I don't think he deserves any credibility. Because I do have arguments against him, it's just that I've repeated those arguments enough times already. So with that, let's start with part 1. How people might find Ken Wheeler.
Okay, so they spent $6,000 almost on an F2 lens, and they're never using it at F2. Why? Because the depth of field is like that at F2.
So there are a decent number of people that have found out about Ken Wheeler because he has done reviews of camera equipment. And I have heard people say that his reviews of camera equipment aren't that bad, although I have also heard other people say that his reviews can be biased. Now I can't really fault him on his reviews of camera equipment because that's not really something that I know a whole lot about. All I can say is that there are other people that do reviews of camera equipment, so Ken Wheeler isn't the only person. Now if he was just a photographer that reviewed camera equipment, I would never have heard of him, so I wouldn't be talking about him right now, and I wouldn't even have a problem with him. It's some of the other stuff that he talks about that I have a problem with. So what else does he talk about? Well, he talks about Buddhism. We'll keep a tab on that because that is something that I might talk about later if I remember to. But he also talks about physics. That is something that he is just wrong about and I usually criticize him for. But he also has this other thing that he talks about which consists of multiple different things. What I mean by this is some of his videos definitely seem to appeal to a sort of right-wing QAnon sort of crowd. These are videos where he will support people protesting against lockdowns in places like Australia. Now it's not so much about him supporting these things, it's more about the framing. You see, Ken Wheeler would state that there was conflict that had broken out between the police and the protesters, yet he'd frame it like it was the fault of the police, despite the fact that most of the conflict seemed to be started by the protesters. Makes you wonder what he thinks about certain protests in America, eh?
You know, we're not talking about, like what happened here in America, where the cops have the right to, defend someone's property. Someone is, setting a match to some property, trying to burn it down.
You'd think if he wanted to be consistent there, he would talk about the times when the police instigated violence in America rather than the protesters, because there were certainly cases of that. Of course, people setting fire to buildings is a bad thing that police should stop. But when you mention that and you don't mention other things, you are framing things in a disingenuous way, especially seeing as most of the protests in America were peaceful. And there's no doubt that people found out about Ken Wheeler because of this, because he supported their view, and it's nice to have people supporting your view. But the way that I found out about Ken Wheeler was because I was searching thermodynamics, which caused one of Ken Wheeler's videos to come up, one about gravity. So of course, I watched it, and there was something that I noticed. Part 2. Counterspace word salad.
Well, the photon idea is an abstraction from misunderstanding the coaxial nature of light, which is a refraction and compression along the dielectric. Yes, and that of course is just a compound ether perturbation modality, because that's all a field is, and I define that in my definition. Counterspace.
So I have expressed numerous times that what Ken Wheeler says is mostly just word salad. And whenever I say that, I will just get comments saying, well, you just don't understand Ken Wheeler, that's why you say that it's word salad. And to that I say, vous ne pouvez pas comprendre cela, donc vous ne pouvez pas dire que je ne parle pas correctement le français. Now people might respond to that going, okay, I didn't understand what you just said, but you were saying something. If I were to learn French, then what you said there, I'd be able to understand. And that is true. If you were to learn French, you might be able to understand what I just said. Big emphasis on the might. Because what I said in French was probably very badly butchered to the point where French people were going, that physically hurt me inside. And I'm actually very curious, if you're fluent in French, please tell me what you think I just said in French. Because I might have butchered it to the point where even people who are fluent in French would not be able to understand what I said. Which would be the point, because if no one can understand me, then no one can say that I'm wrong. Right? So linking it back to Ken Wheeler will say things like harmonic incommensurability or autonomous field modality. And it's just, what do these phrases even mean? And people will respond with, well, you just haven't watched enough of Ken Wheeler to understand what these things mean. But here is the thing. Do you understand what Ken Wheeler is saying? And I don't just mean one or two phrases. I mean, if I were to find a Ken Wheeler video and show it to you, would you be able to tell me that you understand the entirety of that video? My guess is that you wouldn't, and you wouldn't be alone. Many people that watch Ken Wheeler don't actually understand what Ken Wheeler says. And the reason why is because you're not supposed to understand what Ken Wheeler says. Now, of course, there are parts that he wants you to understand. If he's reviewing the latest Nikon P1000, then he will want you to understand that, so he'll speak in normal, plain, everyday English. However, if he's talking about secrets of the universe that he's discovered, he will use phrases that you will need to study for 5,000 years in the library of Cagliostro to gain any meaning from. And again, this is because it is not meant to be understood. And the reason for this is because Part 3, Ken Wheeler has a giant ego.
It is like a substitute for my small wiener.
So I think it goes without saying that Ken Wheeler is a person that definitely thinks very, very highly of himself.
Science has still not figured out how this works. I, however, have, and I'm the first person in the world who has. And the reason I have is because this fat bald tattoo freak you see in front of you, he was a genius, chess champion in high school and college, translate ancient Greek for fun. I literally wrote the book on magnetism.
And obviously, when you think as highly of yourself as Ken Wheeler does, you want people to see you in the same way you see yourself. He wants people to think that he's the genius that he thinks he is. And, I can understand wanting people to see you a certain way. I mean, I want people to see me a certain way. It can be quite frustrating when people don't see you the same way that you see yourself. But most people will just end up dealing with it because you can't make everybody see yourself in a certain light. But Ken Wheeler is determined to make everybody think that he's a genius, whether that be by word salad or by blocking people who he disagrees with. So when I go to YouTube and I go to one of Ken Wheeler's videos and I see, oh, Ken Wheeler has replied to someone, let's see what that reply is, eh? Oh, it's not telling me. Wonder if he's responded to anyone else. Sure. Oh, there we go. Oh, it's not telling me. However, if I am not logged in and then I want to view that reply, all I have to do is... oh, and I get to view his reply. So it really looks as though Ken Wheeler has blocked me. And why would he block me? Because I have criticized him. And I know that he knows that I've criticized him because he tried to leave a comment. Unfortunately, I was unable to read the comment because YouTube removed it. Either because YouTube removes way too many comments, or because Ken Wheeler blocked me and that might have removed it. Either way, this makes it very obvious to me that Ken Wheeler does not like people criticizing him. And not liking criticism is fair, but blocking someone because they criticized you? That seems like it's a bit extreme and like you're trying to protect something, like your ego. Oh, and just as an aside, I find it quite funny that Ken Wheeler's fans really do feel like they're offshoots of Ken Wheeler's ego, because they will always try to defend Ken Wheeler when someone criticizes him. And this is probably because they've bought into this idea generated by Ken Wheeler's ego that he's some kind of genius. Well, I hate to break it to you, but part 4, Ken Wheeler is kinda stupid.
PhD and peer-reviewed means that you kiss a bunch of assholes of people above you, you agree with their crap, and all those people did was agree with crap before them. It is a giant circle jerk of stupidity, ignorance, and hubris.
So often Ken Wheeler will say something, and if you know about the subject that he's talking about, you'll know that what he's saying just isn't true. A good example is the clip that I just played before about peer review. If you have even a surface level understanding of peer review, then you'll know that what Ken Wheeler said was false. Anyone that knows about peer review knows that peer review is an essential part of the scientific process. If you don't have peer review, then people can just go ahead and publish whatever they want in scientific journals without it being checked properly. That's why if you have a scientific journal that doesn't have a peer review process, then you get all kinds of nonsense that is published there. Looking at you, General Science Journal. Also, Ken Wheeler dismissing things like peer review is a general theme across his channel because it would be inconvenient for him if science were correct about what it says. And there are plenty of other things that Ken Wheeler says that is wrong, but it can sometimes be quite hard to catch, because if you're just watching this and don't have any actual knowledge of the subjects that Ken Wheeler is talking about, some of this might just go straight over your head.
If, however, the amperage increase, the actual power lines will actually push themselves apart. If the magnetism, along the power lines increases, they'll actually push themselves apart because the actual toroidal geometry of the magnetic field has been increased along the power lines. So if the voltage spikes, they'll actually swing towards one another. If the magnetism spikes along the power lines, they'll actually be pushed apart.
So this is just wrong because, as I described earlier, it's more about the direction of the current as to whether they're pushed apart or pulled together.
By the way, a mushroom cloud as it rises, the only reason it rises is due to heat. That mushroom cloud is what shape? Mushroom cloud is toroidal shape. People consider that to be energy. That's the impotency of energy.
So I have no idea what the shape of a nuclear blast has to do with anything, but again, it is energy. There is thermal energy there, a lot of thermal energy. So yeah, those were a couple of examples where Ken Wheeler was just wrong. So I did what I do, and I explained that he's wrong. If Ken Wheeler really were the genius that he tries to make himself out to be, then you'd think he'd put a little bit more effort into actually being correct about things. Instead, Ken Wheeler produces videos pretty much daily where he just rambles for 10 to 20 minutes about a topic. No editing, by the way. Now, I will take my hat off to him for posting almost daily because that is quite an achievement, whether I agree with him or disagree with him. Hell, I find it difficult to produce 3 videos a week, let alone 7. Although I suppose I do research and edit my videos, but even then, posting content that often is an achievement. Hey, maybe Ken Wheeler should take a leaf out of my book and have more quality control in his videos. Another thing that Ken Wheeler will do to try and make himself seem smart is he'll bring up people like Nikola Tesla, Oliver Heaviside, and James Clerk Maxwell. He'll bring up quotes from Tesla as though Tesla is some kind of authority on matters, and completely ignore the fact that Tesla had some wacky ideas. Ken also ignores the fact that Maxwell was critical of the ether, which is an idea that Ken Wheeler supports. Ethers were invented for the planets to swim in, to constitute electric atmospheres and magnetic fluvia, to convey sensations from one part of the bodies to another, and so on, until all space had been filled 3 or 4 times over with ethers. The only ether which has survived is that which was invented by Huygens to explain the propagation of light. Just because you can quote someone who is no longer alive today does not mean that you're right. Also, you've got to consider the fact that a lot of these people's ideas were a product of the times that they lived in. If they were still alive today, they would probably hold different ideas. But if Ken Wheeler were to just simply get things wrong, then this is not a video that I'd be making. Which brings us to part 5. Ken Wheeler is dishonest.
I was going to show you some of my shots. I did some test shots out of the Pixma Pro 100. Always do for color correction on a new printer. Always take a shot if you got one of skin and sky. It's an old adage that if you're gonna color balance your printer out, make it skin and sky.
So Ken Wheeler's dishonesty goes a lot further than him just simply framing events in a dishonest way. He'll also frame photos in a dishonest way as well. So one of the things that people have noticed about Ken Wheeler is that for a professional photographer, he sure does lack a portfolio. And because of this, a lot of people say that he's more of a camera enthusiast rather than a photographer. But Ken Wheeler has released a video, which has since been deleted, titled "Some of My Photos and Giant Test Prints from the Pixma Pro 100." And that is the video that I played about a minute ago, where he shows off some of his photos. And on that video, there were people that asked him, "Hey Ken, just want to be sure I understand here. You took all of those photos?" To which Ken gave a response which made it seem like yes he did, without explicitly saying yes or no. But as it turns out, whilst some of the photos that he showed were indeed his, some of them weren't. And whilst this could be chalked up to, oh, maybe Ken made a mistake, one of the photos was cropped in a way as to remove a logo on it. And after people called him out on it, he ended up deleting the video. Now, I find it really difficult to imagine a world in which Ken Wheeler wasn't trying to be dishonest here. If you crop a photo to remove a watermark and then present it as your own, without explicitly saying that it's yours for that plausible deniability, then that is dishonest. Of course, that is not the only way that Ken Wheeler has been dishonest. There is a YouTuber out there called Jason Lanier who used to be friends with Ken Wheeler. Well, that was until Ken Wheeler decided to make a video about Jason, without saying that the video was about Jason, but, you know, it was obvious that the video was about Jason. The accusation made by Ken in his video is that someone that did workshops was refusing to give a refund to a person who had cancer and would therefore be unable to attend. The thing is though, when Ken made the video, Jason was in Cuba, which made it very hard for him to refund someone because PayPal is blocked in Cuba. And Ken didn't even bother reaching out to Jason when he made the video, and Ken does have ways to contact Jason, like his phone number. Like if someone told me that, let's say, Conspiracy Cats was scamming people and that I should make a video on it, the first thing that I'd do is I'd reach out to Conspiracy Cats and just ask him, hey, what's this about? But on top of that, there's also a lot of accusations that a lot of Ken Wheeler's work is plagiarized. But I should mention that these accusations should be taken with a grain of salt. I saw a video accusing Ken Wheeler of plagiarism made by Scientific Lee, and it wasn't that compelling to say the least. In fact, Bill Gates' accusations towards Ken Wheeler of plagiarism are a little bit more compelling, and even that can be tenuous in some places. So that is why I'm calling them accusations at this point. So it may sound like I've covered all that there is to Ken Wheeler's dishonesty, but there is another section, and that is Part 6, Ken Wheeler Wants Your Money.
Any donation is really, really kindly welcome, and I mean that. It's difficult to pay the bills, honestly.
So something that I find quite funny is when people say that Ken Wheeler never asks for money, despite him having a video where he spends about 3, 4, 5 minutes asking for money. Now, there is nothing wrong with asking for donations, and there is nothing wrong with saying, hey look, it's hard to pay the bills, I need a bit of money. The thing that I have a problem with is when you're doing pretty well and then you ask for donations by saying that it's difficult to pay the bills. And this is a person, mind you, that owns his own farm, so it's not like he has to worry about paying rent. Yeah, he'll have to worry about rates and insurance, but not rent. Now, there's the obvious thing to be said here. Even if his bills aren't as high as the average person's, he may still have it rough. And that is true. However,
for those of you that kept asking, I have it right here. There's the new Fujifilm 18mm f1.4.
Alright, so if we search up that lens, we can see that we can get it from Dick Smith or from Rubber Monkey for about $1,600, although this is probably in New Zealand dollars, so let's check Amazon. Alright, so we can get it for $999. Not sure whether that's in US dollars or New Zealand though. Now, to be fair, it does say here, available at a lower price from other sellers. Let's check that. And no, that doesn't look like a lower price to be honest. So if Ken Wheeler is finding it difficult to pay the bills, how does he find the money to pay for a lens like that? And it's not like that is the only expensive lens that he has. It's just that that is an easy example for me because I had already seen the video before. And just to be clear, I'm not berating Ken Wheeler for asking for donations and then buying a lens. That is perfectly fine to do. It's just that he asked for donations because he said that he was having a difficult time paying bills. If he had said something like, hey, I review expensive lenses and obviously it costs money to buy those lenses, so please give me donations, that would have been perfectly fine and there would be nothing to criticize him for there. But with all that being said, it brings us to the final part. My thoughts.
I still say to myself, and I'm comforted by the facts, like, at least I was honest and forthright in what I said. I didn't have some sort of ulterior motive or agenda in what I said.
So if you're not a Ken Wheeler fan, you may have noticed something, and that is I am trying to be as charitable as I can be to Ken Wheeler here. And what I mean by this is I could just assume the worst of Ken Wheeler if I really wanted to, but I haven't been doing that. And that's because at the end of the day, he is a human being like you or I. At least I assume that he's human. It's just that his ego is so large that it has generated its own gravitational field. And that inflated sense of self-importance means that he doesn't take criticism well and has led him to be dishonest. And I think that it's important that people see that Ken Wheeler is not some kind of genius. He's just an average person with a huge ego. And it doesn't help that people basically reinforce his ego by saying the things that he wants to hear. I mean, if you've got an ego, hearing stuff that reinforces that ego isn't going to make it smaller. Whenever someone gives me praise for something that I believe about myself, it reinforces that notion, even though that notion may not necessarily be true. Whenever people praise me for, I don't know, explaining things simply, I think, hell yeah, that's something I do. Except, I have been told that sometimes I am a little bit too convoluted with the way that I explain things. And when I remember that, it's a reminder to just keep myself under control because I don't want to just start talking word salad. Ken Wheeler needs to be able to take criticism because he does a bad job of it. Try criticizing him. You'll probably get blocked. He needs to stop having such an inflated ego because that's not going to help anyone. He needs to actually research things before he talks about them so he can actually be correct on what he's saying. And he needs to stop saying that bills are so difficult to pay when he has money for a $1,000 camera lens. Now, if you want to give Ken Wheeler money, then that's completely up to you. I don't think I've said in this video that you shouldn't give Ken Wheeler any money. I just think that it's important that if you're going to give Ken Wheeler money or even watch him, I think that it's important that you know about Ken Wheeler. Not just the facade that he puts on. Which is really what this video is about. It's more about who Ken Wheeler is. And, why I think that he's a grifter, obviously. That is the important thing that you have to take away from this video. It's not just my opinion, it's a fact. I proved it and you must believe. But in all seriousness, form your own conclusions about Ken and then go down to the comments and tell me why you are right and why everyone else is wrong. But with that, leave a like and subscribe if you like this video. I actually have a question. And it involves one last Ken Wheeler clip, so here it is.
You really have to pay attention to what all these different entities, and you know who they are, don't want you to talk about or to read. You have to zero in on that.
What are those entities that we're supposed to know who they are? I'm not great at lip reading, so I really want to know what he's talking about here. But anyway, I will see you in the next video. Between you and me, thank you for watching.
Induction, induction, induction. Induction, 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 ball, induction, sphere, induction, ball, sphere, ball, induction, sphere, induction, ball, sphere, ball, induction, sphere, induction, ball, sphere, ball, induction, ball, induction, sphere, 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 sphere. Sphere, induction ball, sphere, ball, induction sphere, induction ball, sphere, ball, induction sphere, induction ball, sphere, ball, induction sphere, induction ball, sphere. Gravity is not an autonomous field modality.
The fuck did you just say?
Ball, induction sphere, induction ball.